Welcome to Torah study this lovely morning. This is the day in the Torah when not only we have this whole sweep of Joseph where he starts out in prison, ends up interpreting the Pharaoh's dreams. Pharaoh says, "Oh, you're the smartest guy I know, and therefore I'm going to make you my prime minister," essentially, and he becomes, second in command of the whole country. And then his predictions come true. There's a famine. This is the short version. There's a famine. His brothers back in Canaan are starving like everybody else, and Dad says, "Go get us some grain in Egypt." They go to Egypt to get some grain, and we have this first and second encounter between Joseph and his brothers whom he hasn't seen in many years. His last encounter with his brothers wasn't so positive for him, obviously. They were first going to kill him, and then they sold him into slavery. And it's one of those moments where we, watching this unfold on stage, as it were, we know what's going on, but they don't know what's going on. And it's Joseph recognizes his brothers, but of course they don't recognize him because he doesn't look like what the scrawny kid that they threw into a pit and then sold off into slavery. He's the prime minister of Pharaoh. He's dressed like an Egyptian. He has an Egyptian name now. He speaks Egyptian. So everything about him is foreign and Egyptian. He recognizes them. They don't recognize him. And he plays this out. Obviously, that's part of this great drama. He plays out this opportunity to exact revenge. We're not quite sure if he's going to exact revenge, exactly what he's going to do, and then sends them back, and then they come back again because he wants to see his younger brother. They bring Benjamin back. He demands that if they're going to see him again, they have to bring their brother back, and they do. And this portion ends, the cliffhanger ends with Benjamin being cast into the dungeon, essentially, that Joseph arranges it so that it looks like somebody stole something from him, a goblet from him, and that it's Benjamin, and he says everybody else can go, but the guy who stole it is going to be in prison now. And it ends with Judah about to do what he does in the very beginning of next week's portion, which is offer himself in place of Benjamin. And as a result of that, the Joseph revealing himself, and the sort of whole story comes full circle.
Is Benjamin the youngest?
Benjamin's the youngest, yeah. And his full blood brother, so to speak, biological brother. The other brother from the same mother, so to speak, because they all had four mothers. It was the four mothers of the 12 tribes, so to speak. In any event, so what I wanted to point out was that this is a story that looks like there's a lot of deception and masks. It's a story about masks, right? It's Joseph hiding behind the mask of what he looked like. Well, we have a lot of stories like that in Genesis that, to me, are all linked. Like what? What's the story of somebody pretending to be someone else in Genesis? Leah pretends to be Rachel. Jacob pretends to be Esau. We have one more.
Abraham.
We have one more.
Pretends that Sarah's his
Sarah pretends that she's his wife, his sister, instead of his wife. And last week we had Tamar pretending to be a prostitute, but in order for the same Judah, pretending to be a prostitute so that she could ultimately have some power over Judah and regain some status and get her. So what's up with that? So, and here we have, it seems to me, in the wisdom of our ancestors and whoever wrote the Torah, I don't know who wrote the Torah, but whoever did, wrote these stories, that obviously there's a method to their madness. Question is, what is it? How does it connect to us? Because to me, what makes Torah vibrant and living is the same thing that Gestalt therapists do with dreams, after all. Like, how do you interpret a dream? Oh, this is all about dreams today too, isn't it? So the Talmud says, according to the dream, according to the interpretation, is the dream. Meaning, what does a dream mean? You have dreams. Everybody dreams.
We always wonder what it means.
What does a dream mean?
It's a reflection of reality, the inner reality.
So who gets to say what a dream means when we have dreams?
We do.
Who you follow? You follow Jung. You follow Freud.
So you could pick up the book that says, I have a great book on interpreting dreams at home. Can't remember who wrote it. She's a psychiatrist of some kind. Anyway, and there are people who have like dream interpretations. If it's this symbol, it means that. If it's that symbol, it means that. If you're standing by a river, it means this. If the sun's setting, if you're being chased, it means that.
But we can be taught to do that.
So we can do that, or we can use someone else's guide, what Freud says. It's all about sex or whatever. All about your mother, all about whatever. Or the Gestalt version.
All aspects of you.
The Gestalt version is to remind you everything in the dream is you.
Yes.
It's all in your head. You made up everything in that dream. So everything in that dream is something about you. It's your story, you're every character. And the way to interpret dreams in that model is put yourself as that character. What is it like to be the chaser? What's it like to be chased? What's it like to be the sun, the stars, the moon, the river? What's it like to be the cows? What's it like to be the ones who are eaten? What's it like to be the healthy ones?
So much work.
Right? Yeah, and that's the way I see Torah. The way I see Torah is like it's our collective dream. It's our Jewish people's dream. Good morning. It's our Jewish people's dream, and what makes it powerful is when we see ourselves, our individual selves, and our collective selves in the story. So, to the degree that this story is about hiding and masks, how does it connect to me personally, Stephen Reuben? How does it connect to you personally? Yeah.
In fact, we all wear masks. We wear masks in different occasions. Sometimes we have to play a role as a student. Sometimes we have to play a role as a mother or father. We have to play. I'm
wearing the rabbi mask right now. It's the rabbi mask.
They talk about different hats, but
yeah.
I have a wall of masks, and
yes,
it reminds me of the mask that we all have to put on sometimes.
Yeah, yours are the coolest masks. Though. Your masks are like unbelievable.
The coolest masks are the ones that everybody has on when they're acting a role in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
But these are in fact deceitful masks.
Well, and some of ours are too.
So these masks are for a specific purpose.
Yeah,
in other words, Jacob puts the mask of I'm Esau, covers himself with hair, and goes and literally lies to his father. Who are you? I'm Esau, your firstborn. Are you really Esau? Yeah, I'm really Esau, Dad. I'm really Esau, Dad. And the famous, the hands are the hands of Esau, but the voice is the voice of Jacob. Because ultimately, are we always really fooled by our own masks? How conscious are we of our own masks that we're wearing at different moments in our lives? And when do they crumble? When do they fall? When how long can we sustain the mask that we put on when we're on a first date with somebody and we're trying to impress them or something, or we're we're in we're going to a job interview and suddenly we're trying to figure out who should I be when I step into the room, right? I mean, how many times are we, who should I be when I step into the room? I step up on stage, and that's what actors are all about, right? Okay, who am I gonna be? I'm gonna put that robe on. I'm gonna put that tallis on. I'm gonna put that mask on. I'm gonna put that costume on, and I'm gonna be the Prime Minister of Egypt, or am I gonna be the brother? And finally, how do you sustain that in life? And ultimately, to me, everybody gets busted, after all. Nobody gets away, really, ultimately, with their mask in the stories. Because there's a price to pay for wearing a mask. There's always a price to pay. Even here, even with Joseph, ultimately, first of all, he tortures his brothers for a while. Ultimately,
Have a sit down, have a feast.
yeah, it's like a push-pull. He treats them like they're royalty, and they don't know what the hell's going on because they're just like poor slobs who are coming over begging for food, trying to buy some food, and he's feasting them and whatever. And then he sent them away the first time, and they open up the bags of food that they just bought, and the money's back. And they're going, oh my God, we just stole, all this food, and what are we going to do? All that, imagine the mental torture. They went so hard that they were afraid to go back. It was only because their father insisted they go back. And they said, first of all, it's like we stole the money. And secondly, we got to go take Benjamin. You're going to have no children, So there's a price to pay for everything. And I think part of the story we learn is that, we all wear masks and there's a price to pay. And even here, when Joseph ultimately next week finally breaks down, he cries, he's like embraces his brothers. He says, I am Joseph, your brother. How is my father? Is my father's well? And brings everybody there, and they never believe him. They never fully accept he doesn't hold a grudge. And that there's not going to be ultimately, that there's like some guillotine hanging over their heads. They're just waiting to fall to the very end. They're afraid when their father finally is dying, they're freaking out again. Oh my God. He was just waiting ultimately till Dad dies, and then he's going to get revenge on us. They never get over what they did. So part of the story is forgiveness, letting go, how we carry with us our own misdeeds, things that we regret, our own regrets, how we acted in different ways. How do you let stuff go? Part of what I'm spending a lot of time in these days is listening to lectures and watching programs of people who are energy healers of various kinds, who talk about different kinds of healing and physical healing sort of things. And ultimately, all of them, no matter what their methodology of energy healing is, there's lots of different things that people do. Ultimately, underneath it all of them talk about the need for emotional healing, that the physical healing happens want to sit over here by the table? Come sit over at the table. That what's necessary for the physical healing is emotional healing as well, and all of that's about letting go of things because one of the most famous books in the mind-body world is a book that my daughter gave me called what's it called? It's called The Body Holds the Score. Keeps the score. The body keeps the score, and it's a scientific book, really. So it's for me.
I think one of the most interesting questions that we don't deal with often enough in this part of the Torah is what makes Joseph so willing to forgive? How does he get to that place?
I think he was always that way. He was born that way. That's my feeling.
I think he was always that way, born that way. So what was he like?
What was his Egyptian?
Of course, his Egyptian name I never can pronounce. Here, Pharaoh gives him this Egyptian name in. Where did he get it? It's coming up. Yeah, here he is. It's on page 239. It's verse 44. Verse 44, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, without you none shall lift hand or foot in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh called Joseph Zaphanat Paneah. He gives him this Zaphanat Paneah, and he gives him Osnat, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, as a wife. I forgot. That's another one of the cool things about this week's Torah portion is we get the first Jewish kids born in the diaspora, so to speak. Right? We get the intermarriage. We get Joseph marrying the daughter of an Egyptian priest. which is a popular thing for our leaders, obviously. We have Moses, who got married to the daughter of a Midianite priest, and here we have Joseph, who marries the daughter. So, like, obviously, marrying priests' daughters. That sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? Marrying priests' daughters. Anyway, in the modern world, that's a challenge, unless they're Episcopal priests, because they get to marry. But Catholic priest daughters would be a really interesting thing. Anyway, so Joseph gets part of his ascension into his new status is he gets a new name. Names are powerful. Gets a new name. He gets, after all, that's one of the key elements of what happens when someone becomes Jewish, who wasn't born or raised Jewish, and they choose Judaism as their adult identity. Part of that is, and I always think, I never like conversion, I always like adoption better, because what we do is we adopt that person into the Jewish family. That person becomes part of the Jewish family, and like what happens in most, when I got adopted when my biological father died, and then my mother remarried my current father. I was 6 and my sister was 8. So when I was born, my last name was Schneider, Stephen Michael Schneider. And when my mother married Jack Reuben, he adopted my sister and I, and we changed our last name to Reuben. So and then I became Stephen Michael Reuben. Then I married Dee Dee Carr and became Stephen Carr Reuben. And what's in a name anyway? So too many names. Anyway, but that's what happens when someone becomes Jewish and they get adopted into the Jewish family. They get a Jewish name, get a Hebrew name. Names are powerful. We give them a name, and then they're connected. They're a part of the family. And that's what Pharaoh did for Joseph. Gave him an Egyptian name. You're now part of the Egyptian family. And gave him a wife. I guess he didn't get to vote on that. He got a wife. And then they had 2 kids. Ephraim and Manasseh. Well, Manasseh and Ephraim in that order, but Manasseh and Ephraim. And, of course, because this is one of the coolest things we do, in modern Jewish life, modern meaning post-rabbinic Jewish life of the last 1,500 years or so, the Shabbat Friday night blessing, it is Friday, isn't it? Yeah. So tonight's blessing, if you were doing a traditional blessing of sons, the traditional blessing of the sons is, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. We don't say, may God make you like Moses, or even Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We say, may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. That's like, on one hand, a crazy blessing. Why don't we say, be like Moses, be like Joseph, be like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, our great patriarchs.
And we don't know anything about Ephraim.
We say, be like Ephraim and Manasseh. What do we know about Ephraim and Manasseh?
Nothing.
Why say, be like Ephraim and Manasseh?
We don't know.
Well, Ephraim and Manasseh, here's the reason. Ephraim and Manasseh, who are the sons of Joseph, and therefore the grandsons of Jacob, who are the 12 tribes? The 12 tribes we think of as the sons of Jacob, but that's not really what happens. Because what happens is, at the end of Jacob's life, just as he's dying, which is coming up in another portion or so, when Jacob is dying, he tells Joseph comes and he says, bring your sons. He brings Ephraim and Manasseh, and Jacob blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, although he switches them around because that's the other pattern, that the younger always takes precedence over the older. That's the consistent pattern throughout the Genesis, in fact, throughout the whole Torah. The younger son takes precedence over the older son, turns everything on its head because it's supposed to be primogenitor, where the oldest always gets the best of everything and bigger inheritance. But in the Torah, it's exactly the opposite, right? The younger always takes precedence. So Jacob switches his hands and gives precedence to Manasseh over Ephraim and adopts them as, you're going to be like my sons now. You are now my sons. And they become 2 of the tribes of Israel. There's a tribe of Ephraim and a tribe of Manasseh. So what ends up happening, there's no tribe of Joseph. There's a tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh. So why do we bless them? We bless them because they were the first Jewish children born outside of Israel, in the diaspora, in the most powerful, sexiest country in the world at the time, the leading country in the time, and they didn't disappear. and they didn't assimilate, and they didn't become Egyptian. How could they not become Egyptian? Their father was like king of Egypt, just under the king of Egypt, so to speak, and they had everything. They had all the wealth, all the success, all the everything, and instead they become two of the tribes of Israel that ultimately their descendants go and inherit the land of Israel, the promised land, leave with Egypt, leave with Moses, ultimately a few hundred years later, when Moses shows up. And that's why we want them, because, after all, the Talmud that we follow, which is primarily the Babylonian Talmud, not the Jerusalem Talmud, was written in the diaspora. And the rabbis of the rabbinic period, who we quote most of the time, are also people from the diaspora. And the ability, the power that they ascribed to anyone who was born outside of Israel, who maintains their family connection, their Judaism, their identity, that's like the goal. The goal is not to disappear.
The strength of that string.
Yeah,
Different.
So that blessing is like saying, no matter where you live and no matter who you are, may you carry your identity with you, no matter where you are, even if you're in Egypt, even if you're anywhere, just carry that with you. That's kind of the blessing that ended up being on sons. How we got on that, I can't remember.
About marrying the daughter of a priest.
Yes.
Didn't you tell that story at High Holidays one time about the priest and the rabbi who are having lunch, and the priest says, "Come on, Rabbi, you can just have a ham and cheese sandwich once. Wouldn't you really like a ham and cheese sandwich? Come on, just this time." And the rabbi says, "No." He said, "Will you ever have a ham and cheese sandwich?" "Yeah, on one occasion, at your wedding."
Right. No, I didn't tell that story. I do know the story, but I probably did.
I thought you did.
I probably did. So, in any event, so this week's Torah portion, I love this story because it's many layers. The layers of forgiveness, the layer and the issue of how did Joseph? You said how did Joseph let all this go? Well, first of all, Joseph's way up here and they're way down there. It's pretty easy to be like, no sweat.
Beneficent.
Because look what happened to him. Number one. And number two, that's not how he's portrayed, of course. How he's portrayed is like this. Turn to verse 25. That's on page 237 if you're in the Green Book of the first one. He's interpreting the dreams. Okay, we know the dreams. 7 fat cows, then 7 thin cows, and the thin cows eat the fat cows, and sheaves of wheat and all that stuff. And he's about to interpret it. How does he interpret it? Joseph says to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dream is one. What God is doing, God has revealed to Pharaoh. So one of Joseph's strongest qualities is humility here. He approaches this, he's no dummy, he's smart, with humility. He says earlier, when Pharaoh says, I hear you're a great dream interpreter. Not me. I just say what God says. It's not me. It's not my smartness. It's not me. It's God. God says the 7 cows are this and that, blah, 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 and he tells him the story. It's not me. This is 180 degrees from how we first meet Joseph. Mm-hmm. Joseph the dreamer. Don't forget, this is all about Joseph. That's his shtick. Joseph the dreamer. Remember, Joseph's dreams when he was a kid before he got sold into slavery was he's like the sun and there are the moon and the stars and they're circling around him and then he tells his brothers, he has this dream where they're all bowing down to him, which of course comes true. Yeah. But he has this dream and he tells them. And it's not that he has the dream that's the issue.
He's full of himself.
It's that he tells them, hey, guess what dream I had? You're going to bow down to me. It's like that's the issue. His arrogance, his lack of sensitivity to how that would feel, because here he was, the favored child, the coat of many colors, all that, his father, who is a slow learner, obviously. That's the other thing about the Torah. Nobody ever learns from their own experiences in the Torah. It's like one generation after the next does the exact same thing. They show favoritism to one child. Oop, that blew up in my face. Well, that's okay, I'll do it then. And see, maybe it'll work out better this generation. Okay, maybe it'll work out better in this generation. It's like, hello, never works out well for anybody. It's always a bad idea. And here we have, 12 kids, and Jacob favors one over the other so blatantly, and stay home, give him a thing, whatever, and give him coats and make him special. And as it says earlier in the Torah, they hated him even more. They hated him because of the coat. They hated him because of the dreams and because of what he told them about the dreams, that arrogance. So when we first meet him, he's essentially this spoiled, arrogant kid with no sensitivity at all to his brothers. Here he becomes the opposite. He's learned, as a result of his life experiences, which suddenly became not so special, thrown in the pit, sold into slavery. Then he keeps, every time he rises up, he becomes, the head of the household in Potiphar's house, and then Potiphar's wife thinks that he should sleep with her, and he says no, and then she claims that he tried to rape her, and then he gets thrown in prison for something he didn't do. Well, that's a humbling, and all of these things were designed to be humbling experiences. To go, no matter how smart I am, no matter how good looking, I evidently was good looking, smart, clever, dreamer and whatever. Yeah, well, but circumstances happens, and as we say, stuff happens. Only because I'm being recorded. For all eternity. Anyway, and if you're smart, if you're able, you take the lessons of your own life and you learn from them. That's what life's about. It's about
the toughest lessons are the ones you learn from.
Yeah, I'm always saying this, but I'll say it again anyway, even though I'm always saying it, because it's a fundamental truth. Life's filled with blessings and curses, and you can't always tell which is which. And in fact, everybody in the room has the experience of the things you thought were a curse turning into a blessing, and the things you thought were a blessing turning into a curse. We all have had that experience. Dee and I were just talking about it the other day. We were out in the valley last night with some people, some in a hospital, and as we were there, we were in Tarzana Hospital. We met in Tarzana, so we were reminiscing about our meeting and all that stuff, and how lucky we were that when I applied to be the senior rabbi at Temple Judea, they said no, and then I applied to be the rabbi at Ahavat Shalom, and they said no, and they were the two biggest rejections of my life. I was like, how could they not hire me? And it was like the terrible thing, and which turned out to be the greatest blessing ever. Here I am, and I ended up in funky little Pacific Palisades. Not so funky, but well, it was at the time. It was at the time. In any event, So, and I ended up here in the Palisades, which was, the greatest gift ever. And how grateful we were that this is the way my life turned out and our life turned out, and exactly that blessing curse thing of how convinced I was, how devastated I was when I wasn't hired by either of those places trying to.
I think you transformed us, and we transformed you.
100%. It was great. It was the best thing ever happened. So, but that's what life. This is what life is about. But only when you're willing to take a breath, pick yourself up, and say, okay, what do I learn from this? Because obviously, if you keep doing the same things, you keep getting the same results in life. So if you're smart, you go, I guess I should go left this time instead of keep turning right and banging into the wall. The wall's still there every time I turn right. I think I should turn left. That kind of thing, right? Yeah, right. Particularly you should be, don't stop walking into walls, doors and things. You're supposed to open the door, Judith. The door is supposed to open, you're supposed to walk into it. In any event, so what we see here allegedly is a grown-up Joseph who has learned some humility and taken the wisdom that he's learned as a result of the curses of his life, almost being killed literally by his brothers, sold into slavery by his brothers, enslaved and thrown in prison and whatever. And then, of course, in the last portion, he interprets these two dreams, and he's correct in interpreting these dreams, and one of them gets killed and the other one gets re-elevated back to his position. And he says, it just promise me that you'll remember me. And he didn't. He forgot him. Of course, he remembered him ultimately.
Do you think he consciously decided which was more important in his choices?
What do you mean?
To choose to forgive and accept, or to glory in the position he had of power over them and take advantage of it? Did he make that a conscious decision?
Well, it looks like in the story he started one way, and first of all, it doesn't exactly say. Does it say how long it was after he sent them home? He sent them home till they came back again. It wasn't like he showed up, they showed up, and he went, what should I do? Let me play with him a little bit, and then reveal himself. It was like they were gone.
Yeah.
They could have never come back. How do you know they were going to come back? Maybe he knew, because ultimately everybody was coming to him, because they were the only place that had food in the Middle East at that time, because he, and we hadn't done them yet. I think he had Simeon, didn't he? Yeah. He left Simeon.
That was the hostage.
So he had a hostage. So, they had, but still, they could have not come back. They could have said, he's going to arrest us all for stealing. We have all this money in here. We go back, who knows what the hell's going to happen. So, it was a long process. So perhaps, because it certainly looked like in the beginning he was toying with them because he could, because he had the ability to play with them and do whatever, and that ultimately what won out was, these are my brothers. And ultimately the family and the relationship and the emotion, he gets overcome with emotion. He sends everybody away and cries. He starts crying. And to me, part of that power of this story is that he broke down and cried. That he, how powerful is the lesson that, you have to, family matters. And I was just listening to, I don't know how many people read Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer isn't alive anymore, but Wayne Dyer wrote lots of books. Anyway, this is a radio show that he was answering. There's a Hay House, I think, has a radio show where he used to have call-ins and he would answer questions, and it was all about forgiveness. So I happened to listen this morning when I was exercising. He's talking to this woman who says, she calls up and she says, I need some advice. I don't know how to forgive my father. I haven't seen him in 30 years, and he's dying, and I don't know if I should go see him, but, he abused me and did all these horrible things, and I haven't talked to him in 30 years. So Wayne Dyer's talking about forgiveness, but it's the story of, it's not about your father. It's not about him. Maybe he'll be the same person, maybe he'll be a different person. You have no control over that. It's about you. It's about you been walking around for 30 years holding on this hot coal in your hand, with all your anger and your upset, and who's getting burned? You're the only one getting burned. And he actually didn't use that analogy, but I always think of it. It's like my favorite one. And forgiveness isn't for anybody else. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is for you to allow yourself to feel and let go and cry and not hold that. And that's what you see in Joseph. They got they were the beneficiaries of the fact that he was willing to forgive them, and they brought him there, and they got to live and survive. But they never, as you said, I said before, they never really got over it. They felt guilty their whole lives. They knew, that you're not supposed to sell your brother into slavery. It's like a bad choice that they made one day. It turned out okay. And Joseph, of course, because this is my other favorite comment, which doesn't come till next week's Torah portion, but one of my favorite comments in the Torah is Joseph saying, You meant it for bad, but God meant it for good. That's the blessing curse thing. I know you thought what you were doing, but you're just a tool anyway for God to send me here so I could rescue you and we could all live and survive. If you hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here. If you hadn't done what you thought was a bad thing, it wasn't a bad thing. Because if you hadn't done that, we'd all died. We'd starved to death like everybody else. But God had a different plan. And that's sort of how we look back, and with 20/20 hindsight, or however you want to say it, we interpret our own lives. It's like I just did. Gee, thank God I got rejected by this place. Thank God I got rejected by... The fact of the matter is, if I'd have been accepted, if I'd have been hired by Avat Shalom in Northridge, I wouldn't have known that I wasn't here. I would have been there. I would have been fine, and I would have been, whatever success I had there as a rabbi in Northridge or whatever. It would have been fine, right? It would have been just different. But I look at it and go, oh, thank God I wasn't there because I got to be here. If I'd have been there, I'd have been, thank God they hired me. Isn't that great? You know what I mean? But that's how we do it. That's what we do as humans. We reinterpret we tell our own story. Our story is we are meaning makers. This is what human beings are, in my humble opinion. We are meaning makers.
What does your license plate say?
Make miracles, yeah. We make our own miracles. We are the ones who see them that way. Interpret just like we interpret dreams, we put ourselves in it, we say, this is what it means to me. And the rabbis and Talmud are smart enough to say, whatever it means to you, that's what it means. Who cares what someone else says? It's your dream. What you say it means, that's what it means. That's what matters. And human beings, what sets us apart from animals, in my humble opinion, is that we are meaning makers. I don't probably think that my daughter, my lovely beloved daughter Gabriel, has 6 dogs. She's a dog person. She has 6 dogs. Her dogs are interesting, but I don't think they're sitting around making up meaning about this is what my life means. I just don't think that. I watch them, and for sure they aren't thinking about what my life means.
Created a meaning for her.
For her, she created meaning out of her dogs. They didn't. She did, because that's what we do.
All you're saying is that they landed in butter.
Yeah, they made it. They made it well. Those rescue dogs. She rescued them all. Now anyway. Yeah.
Do you think Joseph was able to forgive and do the right thing? As a grown up and a leader in Egypt because of his Jewish education as a child.
What did you say?
I said, do you think that Joseph was able to do the right thing, to forgive, to be, the grown-up leader in Egypt that he was because of his Jewish education? Because of his Jewish education
as a child. I'm not sure that he had such a good Jewish education as a child.
It was clearly cut short.
I think that we are all the beneficiaries of Joseph's story that becomes our Jewish education, which is sort of what the Torah has been doing for several thousand years, obviously being the foundation of our Jewish story and Jewish education. I think that Joseph's story is clearly one of the fundamental themes of the Joseph story is Joseph's relationship with God. There's no question, but that he constantly says, even though he's now, even when he's an Egyptian, and Egypt has a whole different little theology than Israelite theology of one God and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In fact, Pharaoh's God in Egypt, and Ra and all those other gods, sun gods and all those other gods in Egypt. When we are redeemed in Exodus from our slavery, which happens next time around, Exodus opens with the famous phrase, a new king arose over Egypt who knew not Joseph, and then decides to enslave us all. And then Moses shows up, we get redeemed. The rabbis in one of their more famous sections of the Talmud ask the question, what did we do to merit redemption from Egypt? What did our ancestors do that merited redemption from Egypt? And they say that there's 4 different things that we did that merited redemption. And one of them was, by the way, that we kept our Hebrew names. So
women kept the.
Huh?
Was it the women who kept?
Women did everything. Yeah, I mean, we got redeemed because of women. Anyway, that's what the rabbis say. It's because of the righteousness of women.
Right.
Never shall it be so.
It's always so. It's the women who held on to the identity and passed it down and paid attention. But it was about. We didn't succumb to Egyptian immorality. We didn't succumb to Egyptian theology. We continued to teach the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that in spite of living in a world that was radically different, with a different theology and a different idea about God and gods and everything else, that it's a continuation from Joseph and bringing his brothers and creating in the land of Goshen and creating this Jewish enclave in the midst of an Egyptian world. And that's part of this fundamental underlying story it's, after all, that ends up with Moses representing God in the arm wrestling contest with Pharaoh, right? Okay, I'm representing God, and you think you're God. And we're going to see who wins. And my God wins, and you don't. And therefore, when we vanquish the most powerful army on earth, we vanquish the most powerful country on earth with our invisible God. When Pharaoh is a perfect symbol of the surrounding cultures all needing a physical God, something they can see and something they can touch, something that much of the world continues to do in many ways. Need a physicality. Just had Christmas, after all. I just went to 5 services on Christmas Eve, which Didi and I do every year. We have our church pilgrimage. We start at the Lutheran church next door, and then we go to the Methodist church, and then we're at the Presbyterian church. We go to services.
We just appear.
We just go, sit, say hello. Listen to the same story over and over again. Same quotes.
Well, actually, it's a story of one of our boys.
Same quotes. And I'm proud every time. Exactly. I'm always proud. That's right.
All these people just...
Someone said to one of the ministers, the Methodist minister, only my wife can get away with this. So the Methodist minister says, "I'm so glad you guys are here." And Didi says, "Well, I just wanted to make sure Jesus wasn't the only Jew showing up tonight." Anyway, so only Didi can get away with that. So, but yeah, we do that every year. And it's nice. It's nice. They're happy that we're there. We're happy that we're there. People know us, and it's sort of good for the Jews, I think.
I went to the Episcopalian church on Christmas Eve, and the pageantry.
Oh yeah, they're like the best. They're like the highest. They're the best. They do the best stuff. They're dressed really well. They got the great robes and all their. Yeah, they do the most high church stuff. In any event, to me. This is really the story, and his ability to do this is because he gained the humility and he recognized that there's a power greater than him that is directing his life, and that the things that looked like they were bad, being sold into slavery and going in prison, were actually steps toward the ultimate redemption that allowed him to be in a position, because of his relationship with God, to redeem his family and ultimately save the entire Jewish people.
That, what you just said about he realized there was a power greater than himself, and the fact that he treated his brothers the way he wanted to be treated, are to me the essence of Judaism. The rest of it is just embellishment.
Sounds like Hillel. There's a certain Hillel happening here. Yeah. I know, we're supposed to read Torah text. I never get to it.
Circle back just 1 second on the mask issue that you talked about at the beginning. One of the things that always strikes me about this is that masks may work with people, but they never work with God.
Ah, beautiful.
And one of the challenges of Jewish prayer, which I think is the reason that a lot of people don't like to indulge in it, is it involves unmasking oneself. Because masks, that's part of the metaphor of Jewish prayer, that masks don't work with God and I don't know what that means, but I said it anyway.
Yeah, no, you know.
I meant that metaphor. I meant that metaphorically, but it's hard to stand or sit and and be naked completely. I don't mean physically naked as much as spiritually and everything else, because masks just don't work.
Yeah, there's the Talmud. One of the descriptions, attributes of God mentioned in the Talmud is the revealer of secrets. That is that, and in fact we make reference to that in part of the High Holiday liturgy. That because in theory you're coming to on Rosh Hashanah, you're coming on Yom Hadin, the Day of Judgment. You're coming on the High Holidays to lay yourself bare, to unmask yourself, recognizing that God is the power that with 1,000 people understands 1,000 secrets. That no matter that you can't hide, you can run, but you can't hide, kind of thing. That's how we understood what divinity is about. It's that there are no secrets. We can pretend, and part of growing up, and part of maturing, and part of achieving humility. I mean, after all, look, Moses is the greatest leader. I mean, Moses in the Torah is our greatest leader. It's not Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. It's Moses, right? He's our redeemer. Moses is the guy. And what's Moses's number one attribute that the rabbis ascribe to him is humility. That's number one attribute that allegedly that he's the guy who spoke face to face with God, and et cetera, et cetera. And in spite of that, the quality that the rabbis ascribed to him was humility. Well, there's a reason that they ascribed that to him, because he's supposed to be the role model, of us, because it's tough to be humble when you have your own little successes and when we have your own insecurities. I mean, I've said this before too, but everybody's insecure. Human beings are insecure. We come by it honestly. Human beings were born totally vulnerable and insecure. We're not like animals that drop out of their mother's womb and then go bye. And our legs are up and off we go. You watch the deer or whatever, and off they run. We don't do that. We're this like blob of helplessness for years. Year after year after year after year after year. How many years?
A lifetime.
Is it? Yes, right. We never get over it. It's exactly right. Because how many years is a human being totally dependent on some adult for life and health and food and shelter?
I'll let you know when my college kid moves out.
Exactly. But exactly, that's, and we chuckle and we whatever, because how can we not be insecure? The primary years of the formation of who we are, of our character, of our sense of self, of our understanding of the world, we are this totally helpless thing that all we can do is manipulate and figure out how to manipulate and make sure someone's going to show up and cry, that works, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, what doesn't work, being nice, being this, and we all come up with all of our, how to juggle this, how to do whatever, so that we'll survive, literally survive.
And even as adults, when our parents die, we're left suddenly saying, who do I go to now?
Because we're always the child. First of all, that child never goes away.
That strength.
That child never goes away. So, what was it? Transactional? Was it TA? What was that form of therapy that was about child, adult, and parent? I think it was transactional analysis. Wasn't that right? God, what a memory. I can actually remember something. Yeah, there's that whole form, but where the notion was that each of us has these three parts of us, the child in us, the parent in us, and the adult in us, essentially. When we react differently, the child is always like needy and trying to figure out how to get and take care of ourselves and protect ourselves, and the adult is the rational part of us that can calmly think, and the parent is the judgmental part of us that's always going, and we have all of that in us, and part of the challenge of life is to pick the right version of us at the right time, given life's needs, and that part of what
Right
makes
mask.
relationships don't work is when we're using the wrong parent, the wrong time. Anyway, with somebody else who's also got those same three things happening. In any event, to me, Torah is about teaching us to grow up, and teaching us to be mensches, teaching us to be fully human. What does it mean to be fully human, and how do we learn from these lessons? And in this story, which, because I'm me, we just talk and don't read, that's the way it works. Stuck with me today. In this story, there's all these different levels of the story. There's if we were to, because remember when I started, in a dream you're all the parts of the dream. Well, in the Torah you're all the parts of the Torah. So if you were the brothers, what do you like? Like, in what way are you like the brothers in this story? Anybody think of some way that you personally feel like could relate to what the brothers are going through?
After they...
Anytime in the story. You know, I mean, all of us have experiences of doing things that we wish we hadn't done, after all. I mean, you know, nobody's perfect. That's part of growing up and making mistakes, you know. And one of the great challenges of life for me is remembering that mistakes are how we learn. That making a mistake isn't a mistake. Making a mistake is how we learn. You know, that part of what unfortunately happens to kids when they're in school is that they get taught that it's bad to make a mistake, so that therefore we don't admit when we make mistakes, we hide our mistakes, we feel bad about our making mistakes, we beat ourselves up about making mistakes, we feel guilty about mistakes, instead of, it's like, you know, trying to walk and you watch a baby and they fall down, then you fall down, and ultimately you go, oh, I'm up. You get on a bike, you fall down, and you're up. You know, if you fell, you know, the first time you fall down and you're trying to stand up, then everybody be crawling. No one would ever stand up. You know, but until it's beaten out of us one way or another, emotionally or physically, we know when we're little kids, this is how you learn. You try things, you jump, you do whatever, you learn. You better not jump like that again. You know, and this is life's about. So here, you know, that's what the brothers, they screwed up. They know they screwed up. They've been beating themselves up ever since, because don't forget, why did they get rid of Joseph?
They were jealous.
And what did they think was going to happen? Why did they get rid of him?
He'd die.
And then what?
They would be in favor.
Yeah, but why? So what did they get rid of him for?
They wanted their father.
They wanted their father's love. He loves Joseph more than us. We got to get rid of this guy. Then he'll love us. Oh, Leah. Then I'm going to have lots of kids. Then he'll love me. Didn't work. Didn't work for them either. The opposite happened. They got rid of Joseph, his favorite son, and what happened? He went into the most deep depression and grief that they lost him altogether. Till now. Till 2 years later, whatever it is. Right? I mean, exactly the opposite happened. They just wanted their father's love. Doesn't everybody? Everybody just wants their parents' love. They want their parents' approval forever. We're in the middle of watching the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which we only watch one at a time because we like to spread it out. So, you know, I'm watching this poor thing. You know, it's like all she wants is her parents' acknowledgement and acceptance and love and come and watch me perform. And it's like, nah. You know, it's like, can't you just appreciate your daughter? And I'm watching going, it's like, you know, that's all she wants, right? All she wants, all anybody ever wants is their parents' approval forever, whether their parents are alive, dead, or whatever. We always want our parents' approval. And that's what's going on, part of what's going on here. You know, is stories reminding us that we make mistakes. But if we can learn from our mistakes, and we can grow, and we can feel a sense that there's something bigger than just us, that's what humility is about. That's why Joseph, to me, is a symbol of humility here. Because he keeps saying, it's not me, it's God. And recognizing that there's something bigger than just me. Even though I'm always the center of my own universe, because I'm only in here, I'm not over there. How we touch other people is through humility. That's where our strength comes. Being emotional, boys don't cry unless you're Joseph, and you suddenly get overwhelmed, and we admire that. That's the world that. Yeah.
Do you think that during those years that Joseph rose up to power, he was wearing a mask? He had to, if he believed in monotheism, in God, to be as powerful as he did, he would have to swear allegiance to the Egyptian gods.
Yeah, 100%.
So he lived in guilt during that period of time.
Beautifully put.
All those years.
Everybody's got to make.
Joseph was a fraud.
All those years, Joseph was.
All those years.
Joseph had to accommodate to the reality of his political situation.
So when the brothers showed up, do you think that he finally said to himself, I've carried this burden far too much. It's time to shuck the pretense?
No, he played with them.
I think that...
At the end, the tears, he saved them.
Yeah, he rescued them. I think you're onto something here. I think that's part of the peeling of the levels, the onion of Joseph, who had to have a certain persona. He had his Egyptian face, his Egyptian clothes, his Egyptian name, his Egyptian spouse, his Egyptian kids, and he was Pharaoh. He was like Pharaoh. And then all of a sudden he's immediately brought back into his childhood. The child in there never goes away, that hurt child that got sold into slavery. The minute he saw his brothers, it's like, having to put those together.
Do you think this is the first time that Joseph consciously took an existential risk? Because he did. Saving his brother.
Yes.
He had to defy the conventions that he
did.
Supposedly left.
Yeah, you're right.
So that took.
He had to warn them. Don't say this. Don't say that. So this was a danger.
Courage. That took a lot of. Sort of this epiphany,
Yeah. It's akin to Queen Esther of the Purim story, saying, "Okay, I'm gonna go to the king, and I could get my head chopped off, but I'm going to make this work." And he did the same thing. I'm going to go to the Pharaoh and go, I'm going to resettle my brothers here, those schleppy shepherds that you guys don't like. Is that okay? I'm going to
By the way, I've been playing you
By the way, this is my family. It's like, it's like he had to reveal himself. And that was another powerful moment.
I think this is a story of how Jews have to deal with living in the diaspora.
Yes, 100%. This is that's why be like Ephraim and Manasseh, because in spite of that, they became two of the tribes of Israel. Because, what's it like? What does it mean to be a minority in a majority culture? What does it mean to be vulnerable always to the king?
Like wearing a mask all the time.
And wearing a mask, and when does it get revealed in positive ways, negative ways? Time's up, I see. With the
more important question, why didn't, this I get from my non-Jewish friends, why didn't he assimilate?
Yeah, what are you keeping this Jewish stuff going for anyway?
And a lot of people have asked that question.
Yes, of course. They ask it in every generation. Here we are, 10 Jews in the world, and why are we still around? And why are we still around is the great mystery of life. It's a good one that we wrestle with all the time, and we're such a small percentage of the world population, even of the American population, that in theory nobody should even know about us, shouldn't even hear about us. We're such a small percentage. But everybody knows about us every day, and because we're loud and noisy, as I always say. Because we're Jewish, we're loud, and we're noisy.
Read Mark Twain's comments.
Yeah, I love Mark Twain. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Shabbat Shalom. Got nothing to do tonight, 7 o'clock. I'll be leading services with Daniel Lee.